Hi friends, it's Sonia. So I had so much fun doing my last video where I talked about my favorite podcasts that I thought I would talk about some books that I'm reading. The first book I read a few months ago, so it might not be as fresh in my mind, but it's the classic Black Like Me. These are very controversial books, by the way. The second book is Soul Sister. It's not as classic, not as popular. But when I find something I love, I go all in. So the first book I'm going to talk about is Black Like Me. Like I said, it's a classic, very controversial. It's written by John H. Griffin, who was a journalist. He's from Texas. He worked for a magazine. I believe he went undercover for an assignment. Oh, I just gave it away. I believe this was part of an assignment for the newspaper or the magazine, whatever it was. So the premise is John H. Griffin goes undercover as a black man to understand the plight of the black man in the Deep South. It's a nonfiction, which means it's a true account. So this journalist used pills to darken his skin. And I think he was the first one to ever do this. It was treatment for vitiligo, which I guess people lose their pigment and it leaves splotches. The Michael Jackson disease. So anyways, he used that treatment like in excess to really darken his skin, which is crazy because, I mean, a white person just darkening their skin, that's all it takes to be, perceived as a black person. Like the features were the same and everything. And like I saw pictures of him and it just totally looked like blackface. But I guess that's how conditioned people are to react to dark skin. Anyways, that's a side note. So it is 1959 when he goes into the Deep South, which means it is still Jim Crow. Jim Crow laws are still in effect. He's going to the Deep South, which means Louisiana, Alabama, and Mississippi. He went to New Orleans, which he says was pretty oppressive. And then he went to Alabama and Mississippi, which he talks about in the book is known as the worst for black people. The journalist, John H. Griffin, said that he'd always been interested in doing something like this because he read an article that stated the rate of black men being suicidal was rising, was up. And he said that doesn't mean that more black men were committing suicide. It meant that they were suicidal. They thought about death or they were indifferent with their life. And he said that contrasted what the Southern white people were saying, which they were obviously saying, oh, things are great. We have a great relationship with, black people. Life's good. So he kind of wanted to go find out where the breakdown in communication was. What's the truth? What's the reality? So I think personally that he was doing it for his job, going undercover. But I feel like he also had a genuine interest, like it's something he had thought about before. Also, he was blind before in his life, and he overcame it. Like, how crazy is this? And he also wrote a book about that experience, which I want to read. So I think that the blindness, well, I don't think he said in the book that the blindness probably made him see race relations in a more progressive way, because when he was blind, he had to um, rely on people, and he could only judge people based on their character, um, and so I think that he credits that to some extent, and also he talks about being Catholic, and I don't know if Catholics were more progressive um, with race relations at that time. Um, so for me, I thought this was a very quick but engaging read. I feel like there were great quotes, relevant quotes. He actually had some intense experiences. I feel like he, was immersed in the environment. He lived with the people and really talked to them. And I feel like he had a lot of good takeaways. It was very intense at times. For example, people kind of told him, don't be out late at night by yourself, or not late at night, but like when the sun sets, because people just looking to cause trouble can come and try to attack you. So there were a group of white teenagers one day when he was out after sunset, and they were chasing him, and just it was really scary, actually, even for me. So he saw the bad side of his people, I guess. He was on the receiver's end. I feel like this guy really got it, I also feel like his journalistic experience kind of shined through, because there was a lot of vocabulary in here that I had to look up. Like I said, he used the use of quotes. The historical context and just the setting. Like I liked in New Orleans, he talked about hotels, restaurants, things like that were still there today. I Googled them and saw that they were still there. Like the hotels that he stayed at, tourist sites, or just things like Jackson Square Park or Dillard University, and how the Catholic Church was next to that, and the black side of town, and which hotels were white and which were black, things like that. Like, it just really kind of transported me there. And I really wanted to do this before the pandemic happened. I wanted to do like a Black Like Me tour. I wanted to go to New Orleans, and I wanted to kind of look at all of these sites that were mentioned in the book. I mean, how awesome would that be? Just kind of like walk amongst the backdrop of this book. I also really liked this book because, and I also like nonfiction for this reason, because people talk about real people and real events. And so you get some names of politicians of this time. You get journalists of the time, authors, judges, high-profile court cases. And so I just really found it really informative and relevant, yet easy to read. Even though I had to look up a lot of the words, it was still fun and really interesting. So he kind of sheds light on like the inhumanity of the South, the living conditions, and so that's why I really liked this book. Also, this book inspired some movies. So, Watermelon Man, which was out in the 1970s, it was written by a white man, but it was directed by a black man, Marvin Van Peebles, which I guess was a popular director at that time of that era. I think he did a lot of blaxploitation movies, but his son Mario Van Peebles is more my generation, so I didn't know much about his dad. But yeah, so Watermelon Man kind of was inspired by this book, and oh my gosh, I watched it. It's kind of really bad, but I watched it like 2 or 3 times. I don't know. It's funnier the more you watch it. The first time you watch it, it's kind of like, what is going on? This guy's annoying. This is bad acting, but I don't know. It just became funny. It's not supposed to be funny. Well, it's comedy, but it's also kind of supposed to be social commentary. So it is also about a white man who this one doesn't go undercover purposely. He just turns black for some reason. I can't remember why, but he wakes up a black man, and he's supposed to be a bigot. So he's like really mad about being a black man. But I forgot to say, as a white man, he'd always like run to work trying to beat the bus or something like that. But as a black man, when he tried to do that, people just saw a black man running, and they thought that he was up to something. The streets got really crowded, and he bumped a lady while he was running, and she accused him of stealing her purse or trying to steal her purse, and then the police came, and then there was all this commotion. They were just so certain that because he was a black man that he stole something, and none of this happened when he was a white man. He's the same guy. He went the same way to work, but the only thing that was different was that he was a black man, and so he was late this time because of all of this chaos that ensued just because he was running to work. Then it kind of showed his neighbors and people that he knew were like calling his phone and threatening him, kind of trying to get him to move out of the neighborhood now that he was a black person. It is just, you have to go easy on it. So I watched an interview of Melvin Van Peebles, the director of this, and he said that originally they wanted the movie to end with the white man who turned black turn white again, but Marvin said he did not want that to happen. He was totally against that because he thought that would just be too easy or something. So anyways, I recommend watching that if you read the book. I think that's a good pairing. Also, Black Like Me has a movie based like directly on the book, but it's such bad quality, and I feel like when you're watching it, it's just kind of like they made little changes that you're like, oh no, that didn't happen in the book. Oh, that didn't happen, So it just wasn't the same. Reading a book, it's always way better than a movie. But yeah, I would say watch the movie, but because it's fun to kind of point out the differences. Like that didn't happen in the book. This is different, but it didn't even have the same impact or intensity as the book. And you're not going to get the quotes, and you're not going to get the insight. It's totally different. It was just like a superficial kind of movie, I guess. Another element to the books and to the movie Watermelon Man are that a lot of people kind of make excuses when it comes to race and the disparities and things like that. They may say, oh, well, if somebody had the same education or the same professional background, then they could live differently or whatever. So the premise of these two books and the movie is that it's the same person with the same upbringing, same education, same professional experience. Everything is the same. The only thing different is their skin color. And so, it kind of takes away those excuses of like, oh, well, it's different for me because I'm more educated. I'm this, I'm that. No. So moving on to Soul Sister. That was not a good book at all. Horrible. I had to push myself to get through it. I mean, it was just so long for her to get into her assignment or whatever she was doing. A fourth of the book was she's preparing to darken her skin to live a life as a Black woman, but it's like, get to it already. I feel like she had less insight, less intense moments. I don't feel like she immersed herself as much as John Howard Griffin did. She told people basically that she was really a white woman going undercover being Black. Like, that defeats the whole purpose. She used the N-word and it was just like cringeworthy every time. I don't know, it just lacked substance, I think. I feel like it didn't get good until I think the last fourth of the book maybe was the most interesting, because she said that her and some other Black women tried to desegregate a church, and so they walked into a church and basically they were unwelcomed. People were looking at them and chased them out, almost going to attack them. But that was it for the experience. She also talked about the killer of Medgar Evers. That's like when it started to get interesting, because at least she was like giving facts or like some kind of context and relevant information, because this is also nonfiction. And so she mentioned Byron de la Beckwith, who was a member of the White Citizens Council, which was basically like the Klan. He killed Medgar Evers, who was an activist with the NAACP. So even though the gun traced back to him, he got off. I mean, he went to trial and everything, but he got off. So now that he's in his 40s in the book, he was a fertilizer salesman. I thought that was just so funny. Like, basically selling shit, like. So this happened in Mississippi. He was never convicted for this murder until 1994. So I did the math here. He was convicted of the murder in 1994, but the date of the murder was 1963. So he lived 31 years as a guilty man, a criminal, but living his life as a free man. 31 years. 31 years to get justice. So I guess in an article, something came out about there was some kind of tampering with the evidence. And so Medgar Evers' wife, Merle Evers, she pushed to have a new trial. So in 1994, Byron de la Beckwith, the murderer, was 73 years old by the time he was sentenced for the murder of Medgar Evers. He was sentenced to life, but he died 7 years later. So he served 7 years for murdering someone. Ugh, it just makes me so mad. But I guess there are people who murder people and get way less time than that, or never even are found guilty at all, you know. So about this book, I just felt she didn't have any, there was nothing here. It was just a waste of time. There was nothing like what John H. Griffin did. The quotes, the vocabulary, the intensity, the immersion, the talking with the locals and the people and living with them, and figuring things out on his own. Like where he can stay, where he can't stay, and just being non-biased. And then having impactful takeaways. Her, on the other hand, she told everybody she was white and that she was going undercover as a black woman. The most that she did was like walked around the streets so long that she got a blister on her foot. And then she worked as a housekeeper all day and got paid less than minimum wage. Things like that. And I just feel like it didn't do a service to anybody. This book, I feel like she could have done so much more. And in the beginning, she talks about meeting with John Howard Griffin to kind of let him know that she was thinking about doing a similar experiment or something. And she said that he was for it, that she was the right person to do it. And I guess she had said something like John Howard Griffin said other people had wanted to do it as well, but he didn't think that, it was right for them. I don't know why he thought it was right for her, because clearly it wasn't. So I didn't like her takeaways. I don't think she added anything of value. I think at the end she said something like people in the South believe that race relations will improve quicker in the South because black and white people live closer together than anywhere else in the country. I've heard that theory before. So, I mean, that's not anything revolutionary. But I really wanted to read. I thought this was a great pairing because this is the male version and this is the female version. But she did not do black women in the South any justice. The reason why I liked this book was because I thought it was like an outsider's perspective. I know people would just say, like, well, you want to know what life is like for a black man in the Deep South? Well, read a book by, a black person. And that's true. But I also think that the value of this was the outsider's perspective. So in closing, I felt like John H. Griffin who wrote Black Like Me, had good intentions, good takeaway. It was, I appreciated his insight. Grace Halsell, who wrote Soul Sister, she is what you would think that a white person going undercover as a black person. That book was like what you would think of that, like everything negative. And I feel like the intent kind of was maybe for her own gain, to write a book. It and it wasn't even, had she had more substance and immersed herself and really tried to understand the plight of black women in the South, then I think that her intent would have been clear. And so I think that what was clear was that she just wanted to have go undercover and write a book. And I think what also backs that up is that she has several books where she does the same thing. She goes undercover as a Native American, and she goes undercover as a Mexican, and like all these different ethnicities. And I just can't even think about reading those other books because this one was so bad. And so I just feel like she's, pumping out these books, but there's really nothing to it. Like maybe she just wanted to be an author before she died. I don't know. Something ironic is that she ended up having skin cancer or some kind of cancer due to the skin darkening medication she took for that little experiment. How crazy is that? I hope that you give this a read, whether you like it or not. It's classic, and you should give it a read. This one I thought it would be a good comparison and a good pairing, but it was just not good. So I just would say you're not really missing anything if you don't read it. I also forgot to say that Soul Sister was written in 1969, so that's practically 10 years after John Howard Griffin wrote his book. So that means different presidents, different landscape. So she went to Deep South after Jim Crow laws. I think that's about it. Let me know if you read either one of these books or if you watch any of the movies related to the book. And thank you for joining.